All right, thank you everybody for joining us today. This is a Chatham House event led by primarily the Common Futures Conversation, which is a flagship project by the Chatham House that brings young people together, both from Africa and Europe, so that we can discuss on important topics such as the COVID pandemic or technology, for example, which is why this event is being held. This is one of the major challenges that the CFC community has during this month. Now, the CFC members will get an opportunity to make policies and think strategically about how we can improve the performance of industries and companies to act more responsibly, as well as how they can contribute to the economy in a better way. And just to keep in mind that this event is being recorded, and later on, after we have our panelists discussing a few important trends with technology and the labor market, we'll have a Q&A session where you can put your questions in using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. All right, so my name is Ayan Teliker. I am an CFC member, and I am a student as well at King's College London, studying economics and management at bachelor's degree. So this event is about skill polarization and the future of work, which is really timely and important in the current circumstances, as well as how we can look to adapt to some of the common trends that are emerging with the fourth industrial revolution. I would like to firstly introduce our panelists. So the first panelist that we have is Dr. Hannah Al-Mubaid. Hannah is an associate fellow with the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House. She's also a research fellow with the King Faisal Center and Islamic Studies in Riyadh, and a visiting fellow at the LSE Middle East Center. She researches the influence of social dynamics with youth attitudes, work, education, and careers in the GCC, with an emphasis on vocational education in Saudi Arabia. Since 2005, she has worked with different private, public, and non-profit organizations in Saudi Arabia and the MENA region. So please welcome Hannah. Our second panelist is Alan Octola. Alan is currently serving as a fellow at the Alexander von Humboldt Institute for Internet and Society. He is exploring digital platform with particular interest in skill polarization, future of work, and local regulation of platform work with focus on sub-Saharan Africa. He's also part of the Black Diplomats Academy of Canada, where he founded Diplomacy Now Institute, a global think tank organization that seeks to develop future leaders. Recently, he served as the 2020 Internet Society IGF Youth Ambassador, with an aim of reinforcing the importance of multidisciplinary leadership in fostering the sustainability, security, and development of the internet. So please welcome Alan. And lastly, we have Dr. Fabian Breitzmann. Dr. Fabian Breitzmann is an associate researcher at the HIIG, and he's department research lecturer in AI and work at the Oxford Internet Institute at the University of Oxford. Fabian is interested in social data science applications such as network analysis and data mining to the study of innovation, the platform economy, and social processes. Having worked as data scientist in the industry and academia, Fabian has investigated social phenomena with a multitude of different online data sets in domain as different as marketing, real estate, innovation, online freelancing, and political extremism, which is very interesting. He is confident that thanks to availability of large data sets of computational methods, it will be possible to describe social phenomena with the same accuracy as we do in processes in the natural sciences. Fabian has studied economics in both Berlin, Warsaw, and of course Vienna. He holds a doctoral degree for Vienna University of Economics and Business and works as a data scientist at the University of Oxford since 2017. So please welcome Dr. Fabian. Before we begin again, just to inform you guys that all our other participants will be muted during our panelists discuss, and you'll be able to ask questions after their presentations. So I would like to hand it over to Hannah. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayan, and thank you for hosting this very interesting panel. I'm going to try to give an overview of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and what it's doing to the future of work. So what is it that we really actually do know about this Fourth Industrial Revolution? It's a phrase that dominates discussion on work and skills. And there's been a dramatic shift in the skills employers need or claim to need in the workplace. There's also a privileging of soft skills over technical ones, which I think many of us are very familiar with. So I'm going to go a little bit into kind of what that looks like. It's been argued that this trend has created kind of a skills escalator, where the number of skills that an individual can lay claim to is rising, but those on the bottom step are still on that bottom step. So this idea of skills polarization in labor markets isn't necessarily a new phenomenon, as industrialization has led to a shifting nature of skills needs and demands. But the unprecedented speed at which automation and technology are changing workplaces, in addition to demographic and climate change shifts and COVID-19, it's important to investigate how this influences the demand for skills within different jobs and in different industries around the world. The debates often begin with the question of what will the future of work look like, and lead to discussions about this fourth industrial revolution, which Klaus Schwab has noted that the changes are so profound that from the perspective of human history, there's never been a time of greater promise or potential peril. The ILO, the International Labor Organization, outlines many kind of mega trends and implications for skill. Technological change will likely change 1/3 of all jobs radically, as some job tasks are automated or augmented by technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning. And researchers estimate an expected average shift of 42% in required workforce skills by 2022. So now, which will result in fundamental changes in job profiles. And these dynamic changes may affect millions of workers, requiring them to update and upgrade skills and change jobs and occupations completely. The automation and digitalization of jobs are reducing the demand for those routine and manual tasks and increasing the demand for those non-routine kind of cognitive skills, such as problem solving, interpersonal, and other core skills. And at the same time, digitally intensive jobs are at a lower risk of being automated. So digitization penetrates all sectors of the economy, but not evenly across and within sectors or across countries. And much depends on infrastructure and the level of digital connectivity. For instance, 80% of the population in Europe have access to the internet, compared with 45% in developing countries and 20% in the least developed countries, where men are 52% more likely to be online than women. It's also been argued that in the future, there will be high or low paid jobs, and everything in between will be the job of robots. So automation is replacing jobs that require those kind of mid-level skills and polarizing that labor market. And the idea of polarization indicates a gap between kind of high and low skill jobs, or even another way to look at it as a gap between kind of high education, high wage jobs and low education, low wage jobs, with very little in the middle. And not enough research has actually been done on emerging countries, particularly in Middle East and North Africa, or all developing nations really. But I do look at some transitions from education to work within this region and kind of the labor market policies that it kind of result from this context. But the literature that does examine these shifts more generally points to technology and trade as being the main drivers of the decline in that middle skill occupation and shifts in the structures. So most countries will use international standards to classify occupations and define the skill content of different jobs. So you have high skilled workers that hold jobs in kind of managerial and professional kind of occupations. Middle skill workers would hold jobs in more clerical, craft and plant jobs, or kind of any job which requires machine operation. And these are the ones that are disappearing. And then you have the low skill jobs where they tend to be in sales and other services, which are not disappearing. But again, that's where that polarization is happening. And technological advancements have had profound influence on individuals. And of course, and the young people who are in education or training that aspire to find work where whatever skills they might be acquiring through that process are going to be relevant. And that leads to questions on how to obtain the right skills for these jobs of the future. And in a region where young people dominate the demographic pyramids, these are pressing questions. How will technology change the way people prepare for work and experience it? As I mentioned, automation experts argue that those kind of routine, repetitive jobs will likely disappear, and jobs that require analytical and higher order thinking will remain. And while this has happened less in the MENA, it's inevitable that that will follow suit. And debates about skills kind of tend to classify those high skills as those soft skills, those transferable generalized skills rather than domain specific ones. So I mentioned a couple, but just to add a few more: problem solving, team working, motivation, judgment, leadership, amongst others. And there's an argument that employers actually have always been looking for these types of skills, but they didn't necessarily call them skills in the past. They were more kind of the type of person that you wanted to employ. And the pitfall here is that not enough importance is placed on being an expert in the field while also then using these skills to innovate within your field. So how are people navigating these shifts? In the Middle East, North Africa is kind of the region I look at. So two things, upskilling and de-skilling. De-skilling is really another way of saying underemployment. It just means that regardless of what kind of education you might have, the labor market doesn't necessarily have the capacity to absorb that. So you're going to end up in jobs that aren't necessarily where you want to be, and your skills are not necessarily going to be valued or put to practice. I think the problem is, despite expansion of higher education, which is obviously always talked about as a solution to how we're going to kind of mitigate the issues that happen with these transitions, is that we're not necessarily changing how we're teaching. And we assume that a qualification is a proxy for ability. So the focus on education itself without actually thinking about what we're talking about when we're talking about education is a bit of a problem in this entire debate. And the second, as I mentioned, is upskilling. So this is an area where we're seeing a lot of rapid shifts as well. A shift toward micro-credentialing, modularized training, massive open online courses, MOOCs, and then also just platforms like Coursera are offering people an opportunity to kind of get a lot of these skills that they think that they're going to need. So I think that education definitely needs to adapt to the digitization of the economy in two key ways in order to really equip young people with the skills for the future. A, to focus on lifelong learning, and B, to change the way we teach. So there is kind of a reinvigorated momentum for investing in people's capabilities and capacities since the kind of COVID. And it really reflects a heightened sense of urgency and shared responsibility of making sure that people have opportunities to learn and reskill, because there's this argument that skill shelf lives are actually quite short. Skilling, reskilling, upskilling throughout all stages of life is really a precondition and an accelerator for people to access work as things shift. And the second thing is changing the way we teach. So we should be teaching very important and domain specific and specialized skills different. We should teach those through processes that instill those soft skills and really enhance them. So you shouldn't teach critical thinking and time management and leadership, but you should give opportunities to practice those skills throughout the education process. So when thinking about all education, general, secondary, and tertiary education, the processes need to be different. And actually, the way you need to do that is through thinking about what the teachers are modeling and how the classrooms are structured as well. And thinking forward to just kind of two other things that often come up when talking about skills in the future of work: entrepreneurship and the gig economy as options for young people. I think two components are very necessary: training and funding. So these don't have to be mutually exclusive either. 70% of all workers globally are either self-employed or work in micro or small enterprises. And they're less likely to have anybody that's investing in their own skills. Often that's due to skills, basically financial constraints. And self-employed workers in the kind of the gig economy tend to have limited access to any training opportunities. So the idea is that firms which rely heavily on these forms of employment really do need to kind of think about their role in making sure there are opportunities for training, regardless of whether or not that person is necessarily your full-time employee. And promoting learning for such workers will require financial and non-financial incentives that target both employers and workers, irrespective of employment status. The thing is with the gig economy is oftentimes, I mean, it's really actually just the idea of the informal sector, which has existed for so long. And one of the problems is that can be stigmatized. And so, for instance, within some North African economies, particularly Algeria, for instance, people have been working in the informal sector for a very long time. But one of the major issues is then it's harder to get into formal education and employment if you have the reputation of being involved in an informal sector. So we need to also make sure that we're taking these things into consideration when making policy. And in terms of funding, just as kind of my last point, the more funding entities in the market, the better. So from incubators to microloans to additional opportunities for getting angel investors and kind of maybe even creating an ecosystem where that is the norm, the more likely people will be able to employ whatever skills they might have in order to make money to upskill and then find more reasonable and important work. So I didn't want to take too much more time. I hope that those kind of that shed light on some of the key debates within kind of this whole future of skills debate, and hopefully set a little bit of a backdrop for the very interesting research that you're doing.
Thank you, Hannah. That was really insightful and yeah, and very relevant to what's really happening today with young people and how they are getting into jobs, especially in North Africa and in the MENA region as well. So thank you. Next, we have Fabian, who will be presenting his research from the University of Oxford and talking a bit more and going into a bit more depth about this specific topic. So I would like to hand it over to Fabian.
Yeah, thank you very much. So give me just 1 second to share my screen. I hope that you are now able to see the slide deck here. Do you?
Yes.
Perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, so thank you very much again for having me here, giving me the opportunity to talk about my research, and thank you very much to Hannah for the great introduction to the topic. I think this was very insightful and covered, many of the macro effects that are mega trends that are really important here. And I would want to contrast some of these views that she has presented with, more concrete perspectives on one very particular type of labor market, namely from the gig economy and online freelancing platform. So to summarize again, just very briefly, what are we talking here about? We talk about a phenomenon, as you can see here on the first slide, which is sometimes called crowd work or the gig economy. And it has become so important, as Hannah already indicated, that organizations like the International Labour Organization, ILO, are dealing with that. And the general idea is that people work from wherever they are. You see here these people, these photos come from the website of the International Labour Organization. They work at home with their computers, for employers at maybe the other end of the globe. So it's not about things like Uber, it's not about any kind of delivery services. Here we talk about those platforms where the full work scheme can be mediated online. So from hiring to job description, obviously the work itself, payment, etc. And the idea is, as you can see here, that this might be a very positive thing, as you can see here from these smiling faces. So good thing, many development chances, people can get good jobs in their local environment. They don't have to migrate. They don't have to compete, in the local labor markets, and they can be brought out of poverty. This is the positive portrayal, but there's a negative portrayal too. And this you can see on the right-hand side. This is a photo that was taken while Mark Graham, founder of the Pharaoh Foundation and professor at the Oxford Internet Institute at my institute, was on field work in Sub-Saharan Africa to investigate, how this reality of gig work looks like. And here you can see an advertisement that says, get a job online, work 3 hours a day and earn $1,000 a month. So, I mean, could happen, but if you look at the overall environment, it looks like, a bit of a fishy advertisement here. So the big dilemma is, so can online labor markets, can the gig work be a means for economic development, for bringing jobs to marginalized regions and marginalized parts of the society, global society, or would it rather increase spatial inequalities? Will it rather resemble and repeat what we knew and know from labor markets at large and the economy overall? And here's our argument. I don't want to give you too many, boring details. If you want to have a closer look at it, please check out the paper. The preprint is available online, called The Polarization of Remote Work. But what is the main argument? Our main argument is that the data shows, or this was, our hypothesis, the data will probably show that actually we see that this remote platform work is quite polarized globally. And why is that theoretically? What is the foundation for this? Because we have seen three trends overall over the past 2 decades playing out, 2 to 3 decades, that drove polarization. One, we have a phenomenon called digital Taylorism, famously summarized in a book called The Global Auction. So the idea is that increasingly, as the digital value chains are getting more complex, as more and more digital technology progress happening, we see modularization, we see specialization of tasks. So while in the old days, maybe a programmer needed to do everything from website development to game development, whatever, now this is increasingly put into chunks, and these chunks can, thanks to internet and digital communication technologies, be mediated and brought anywhere across the globe. And through that, we could expect that we see more competition between people that are at very different ends of the world. Another form of polarization we've seen already playing out is urban-rural dimensions. Urban-rural polarization, it has been summarized recently in a book by Paul Collier called The Future of Capitalism, where he talks about the booming metropolis with broken provincial cities. And the idea is, why should we see this polarization? Because metropolitan regions have more interaction between people, because just due to the fact that there are more people, there is specialized institutions, specialized training opportunities, business opportunities, leading to more and more interaction, innovation, and all other kinds of complex economic activities that are becoming increasingly important in our economy of the 21st century, further leading to polarization towards metropolitan areas. And the last one, the polarization between occupations, has been investigated by many people, also by David Otto, who talked about skill polarization, a topic that Hannah just talked about already, that we see, premium for certain specialized types of skills that are relatively scarce, and de-skilling or low wages for people that have more abundant types of skills. And our argument is that because the gig economy, the online labor market, is global, it is largely unrestrained, it has not many or no regulatory boundaries whatsoever, we will see that these factors play out completely in this global online labor market. And this is what I want to show you from our large-scale data analysis. I spare you the details of the methodology that we used to, that we needed to, assemble the data set, but you see there's a lot of data science behind it. So many years of data collection and a lot of data preparation. We skip all of this. Please check the paper if you want. And here's the main result. What you see here is a world map showing the connections in this online labor market. This is data from 2020. What you see here is the following. So obviously there's a world map. So gray is the different countries of the world. There's blue dots, there's red dots, and there's yellow lines. The blue dots are cities where we have many buyers, so where we have a lot of labor demand. The red dots are cities where we have many sellers, so a lot of labor supply, workers. Blue employers, red workers, essentially, and the yellow lines connect them. And this is a random sample from the data. So this is not selected in any deliberate way, but just randomly from the data. And what we see is, yes, indeed, this online labor market is a global market. This is the good news, and little surprise given the global scope of these platforms. But what we also see is that actually the geography overall is very clustered. So we see that, obviously other parts of the economy and inequalities in these other parts of the economy are transcending into this online labor market. So we see a lot of labor demand from the coastal regions in North America, Western Europe, and in Australia. And we see most labor supply clustered in Southeast Europe, in South Asia, and the Philippines. What we also see is what we don't see, namely that many parts of the world, even parts where many people live, are not really participating. So of course, not much is going on in the many parts of Central Asia, which are also not that densely populated, but also in Sub-Saharan Africa. Africa in general is only taking part marginally. The same goes for South America. And this brings up the question, why is it that we see this unequal distribution? In order, to keep with the time constraints here, we will not go into this into too much detail, but in the paper, we take a closer look into the distribution between countries. Within countries, we see that the overall distribution is unequal, no matter what scale you look at, no matter whether you look into the US, whether you look into India, Sub-Saharan Africa, or between those regions, we always have a scale-free distribution, so very high levels of inequality. But that inequality can be explained by place-bound institutions and economic factors. So we see actually most of the online labor is drawn to places that have certain types of institutions. Obviously, wages play a role, as we see, you know, not many projects go from the US to the US because wages are high. People want to save on the wage bill. This is why they outsource to places like India. But these places here, where actually the majority of online labor goes to, is places that have a certain, are over a certain threshold of institutions. So we talk about education levels, we talk about internet connectivity, obviously, and another variable that we talk, the IT specialization of the economy. So in how far is the economy already directed towards IT-related skills like call centers, outsourcing, etc. And this is the factors that draw most of the online labor activity to them, which is good news for those places that have these institutions, but bad news for all the other places in the world that lack these institutions. And how is that becoming problematic, and how is this, you know, playing out in the online labor market? Just one more figure here. We don't look into this into too much detail. This is a heat map showing the different occupations in this online labor market. So there's different job types. Essentially, there's well-paying and not so well-paying job types, good and bad jobs. And there's different types of skills. And as Hannah already said beforehand on the macro trends, we see that these different types of jobs have different skill intensity. So there's certain types of skills, like here on the top, we have computer-related skills that are very much important in particular jobs here in the middle, and that are of less importance than other types of skills like clerical data entry that don't pay high wages. So long story short, and to wrap all of this up, we see that skills are the one main dimension that drives the outcomes for platform workers in this online gig economy platform. And the availability to skills is not equally distributed across the globe. So it's not a flat world. It is drawn towards, and it's really driven by place-bound factors and institutions. And therefore, if you, as an institution, as an organization or society, want to use online gig economy as a chance for development, as a chance to bring decent work to people, then you should not only look into the platform infrastructure, which is important, but you should also particularly look towards down to the ground factors. Like, obviously, it's clear implications: provide good internet access. Without internet, no internet economy. But also try to position this online labor market into local development skills, to try to teach marketable skills that are available on the ground. It is unrealistic to develop a hardcore machine learning coded community in an area that has no computer related business activities on the ground. So teach marketable skills to people, and also nonetheless still look into the platform infrastructure and how this is affecting the outcomes of freelancers online. Yeah, that's from me. Thank you so much, and looking forward to continuing this discussion.
Amazing, Fabian. That was really insightful about all the different graphs and maps, and yeah, really interesting to look at as well, just from a visual side of things, as well as understanding the concepts behind it. I would like to introduce the next panelist, Alan. Alan has research from the HIIG he'll be presenting for us. So I'll just hand it over to Alan.
Much of my work, which I'll be doing, will be augmenting what all speakers have said. But what I'll be putting right now is just putting numbers to the figures that we actually have right now. Most of the numbers that we already have, because we talk about most of the skill polarization, but we don't have any numbers. So we'll just go into what we've been doing at the sprint, especially with regards to the future work and also skill polarization. So next slide. So much of what we'll be doing right now is our research question will be identifying the marketable skills online. And also the second one will be, we'll be looking at what jobs have the most intense labor over those few years that they have actually been happening. And also we are looking at how culture is affecting platform and job search and job postings. So that is what we'll be doing in our research questions. So what we found actually in most of our research, we found that we did pick up data, which Fabian mentioned, data from the online platform. Here we are using the Upwork, or the Odesk, formerly known as the Odesk that we used here. So what we found here online here is that we, from the platform that we use, we picked data from, there were 47 job occupations. The leading job occupation was the technical writing, followed by web developing, and also computer occupations. Those are some of the top 3 platforms. But you can see from this plot, there's a very range of distribution of graphs and also different types of occupation that are available in Africa. So can go to the next slide. So here we will be focusing mostly on Ghana and Kenya, which is our area of focus for this particular sprint. So in Kenya, the leading job occupation we found was technical writing, which had about 10,000 participants, followed by web developers, which we found, and also secretaries and administrative assistants. So you can actually see from this particular, as we go along, you'll actually see how the different skills and also how different countries, especially now with this one, we're using Ghana as a reference, and even Africa as a reference, how those skills will be polarized. So here you can see Ghana. The difference is Ghana actually has about 140 projects, which is actually quite, the leading projects in Ghana we found was about 140 projects, which is quite different because here in Kenya we had over 9,000, which was the leading one. And technical writing accounted for about maybe it was the leading occupation, but here you can see in Ghana you're finding computer occupations being the leading. Though here we can also find for the second time web developers being like a second occupation in Ghana, and also they're also involved also in areas around market research. So these are, you can see the differences between Kenya and Ghana. Also, as we go along, they'll become more clear. So we also did a search from our data set, and we found what our first speaker was mentioned in terms of even within countries. So you can find within countries there are skills are polarized within the areas of within the cities. If you look at Accra, you see they're like about 4 or 5 points where they're achieving, they're protruding, meaning there are more skills, more workers who are being hired from this particular reason. But again, if you look at in Nairobi, I think it's a bit biased to say that Nairobi is actually occupying most of the lion's share of work. So this brings out the question: how can we bring people in the rural areas online, and also how can they also enjoy the benefits of the gig economy that is happening? So these are some of the questions which we're trying to answer here. So here is just a quick scan about the top 10 projects. We are looking at the projects that were costing over the period of study. The data was collected for a period of 7 years, from 2013 to 2020. So we found that the leading charge here was technical writing, and also web developing, and also the secretarial jobs, which were found as the leading jobs in Kenya. So next slide. So here we are showing we did a count in terms of there are a number of projects that were actually found, and when we do a project count, what normally comes out actually is that, especially in Kenya, when we were showing the project occupation distribution, we found that the distribution of wage is not similar. So there's a point which some wages are some people are paying more, some people are paying less for the job. So we did a median calculation to find out at least the most probable amount of work where someone can actually get paid. And here we found that we found the leading country with the median charge, which actually employing Kenyans, were actually in Denmark, and they're actually leading in terms of marketing, research, analytics. And also you can see how countries are actually employing Kenyans here, because we found that it can see it's not there's a very huge difference in terms of, now if you look at the top skills and also the marketing, the top skills by charge. So if you look at the median charge, so that means actually there's a very big discrepancy in terms of pay of people online. So this is what you can infer from this data that we found. And then in the subsequent data, we did a count of the number of projects, and you can actually find that when you actually correlate them, there's a very huge difference, because if you look at the project charge itself, it tells you that actually the technical writing is actually the leading project that we are paying people. So we are trying to investigate some of these differences and how they come across. So these are some of the interesting things. So next slide, we are looking at Ghana, in Kenya. Ghana, we found if you look at the by charge, in terms of the charge, the top drawing job here was what we found in the previous slides, areas around computer occupational and also web developing. And also you can see also secretarial jobs taking a lion's share of some of the jobs in Ghana. It's also worth noting that when we initially when we found the number of online workers in Ghana, there were about 1,000 there. But in Kenya, we found the number of people who were online were about 27,000. So that one also shows you there are so many people online in Kenya compared to Ghana. So these are some of the skills with some of the questions we'll be seeking to answer as you go along with the sprint. So here we're looking at here we are just interested in knowing who employs people, who is the biggest employer. In Ghana, we found the biggest employer here was India. But one thing that was interesting about this employer, the biggest employer does not mean the best paying person. So here you can see they employed about 398 people. But you see, if you look at their median pay was about 400, and also their project charge was about 900 US. Because most of this platform work, they calculate their cost in terms of dollars. So, and as you see, you can see there's a very huge discrepancy in terms of the wage, and these are some of the differences we're trying to investigate. So here we're looking at the project count, and here we are looking at the project charge, which is more or less a summary of what have we done in the previous slide. So you can proceed. So here we're looking at also the median charge, which is also very interesting because the median charge tells you actually what the approximate median pay that each employer pays per project. And you can see a very huge discrepancy here. When we found most of the work is being, most of them are actually going to space. But here we found Canada coming in as one of the top employers. But also because they also don't have so many projects in Ghana. When you look at in terms of median charge. So top skills per charge, this is like the web developing. So you can just skip this slide and go to the next slide. Yes. So this is also something also that we found interesting. When you look at the people who are getting hired in Ghana and Kenya, what we can, for this slide, what I wanted to show is for every 6 applicants, there's one, in Ghana, for every 6 applicants, there's one person who's getting hired. But in Kenya, you find for every 9 applicants, one person gets hired. So that means there's a lot of competition because there are so many people online in Kenya compared to Ghana, based on the data that we found on this data. So we did a correlation in terms of the scales, because we found we wanted to know the project count and the hires and the project charge. We wanted to do a correlation. What this correlation tells us, what we expect from this correlation is that if the projects are more, definitely more people are going to get hired. And if more, we are also assuming that if people are getting hired, it means there also a direct correlation with the charges, so that the project will come. So here you find, with a quick analysis here, is that we find a strong correlation between the project sum and also the project count. So the more projects, more number of hires, which is shown by 0.81, which was a very high positive correlation.
Just to inform you, Alan, about the time, just running a bit short, just so yeah. Yeah.
So this concludes our work, because our work is to model what kind of the future work will look like. So we're trying to focus based on this data that we have. How can we focus? What does the future of work look like in this online economy? So what we're doing here, we're trying to use probabilistic focusing, but also what we also based on the data that we have. So we're trying to see what we're seeing in this result is that the bar graph represents the observed, and the red lines indicate the expected values. So when the expected values are not matching the observed values, it shows this histogram. You see, it's pointing downwards. That means the expected value did not match the observed values. So it goes a long way, and we expect as the number of hires increases, there will be also more projects, which is happening. So this is also more or less also in line with the expectation. So next slide. So here we did a 1-year projection of our work, and what we are thinking at the moment is that at this time, based on the historical data that you have, there won't be much change in terms of the online labor that is there. The projection comes in the red dot. If you see the red dot, they are more or less matching the black dot. So that means they are more or less similar. So we don't expect very sharp differences in terms of change in the labor market as it is.
Yeah, sorry, Alan, I have to cut you off there to get things done. Oh, well, there was, yeah. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really insightful with the data and really interesting to see what sort of specifically about Kenya and Ghana really, and what sort of how to specialize there in terms of what jobs are really important. So yeah, thank you for all the panelists for insightful things. Now I'll just jump into the questions that we've got so far. So first question is asking about if 40 to 80% of people are going to be redundant, so to speak, and if we are economically redundant, aren't we going to enter sort of a North Korea situation? So if I just throw that out to all of you panelists, what would you say to this same question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the message is that everybody is going to be redundant. I think that the message is that the current education systems are not necessarily catering to the types of skills and work that we're expecting to see grow over time. And not to say that it's the role of the education system to produce employment opportunities. That's the role of a completely different kind of market forces, as well as, you know, just the growth of the economy is not the job of an education system. However, we do need to think about how people are learning and what they're going to need to be doing and where demand is going to be. But I don't think that it means that humans are going to be redundant and replaced by robots. I think that actually what we're saying is that humans are going to need to learn how to adapt to technology being a huge part of the future of work, and how to use that technology, and also how to continuously update their skills throughout their life cycles, and how governments and private institutions can support that process.
Right.
Absolutely. If I could just maybe add one more word about this, I would like to fully agree to that sentence, because I think the moment a job becomes redundant because the technology can replace it, it is also a type of job that no one would probably actually want to do. I mean, think of these great vacuum cleaning robot that we have nowadays. I mean, I never liked vacuum cleaning, and I'm really glad that the robot can do it now. So this means, you know, redundancy. I think people will be happy about that. But at the same time, and this is the interesting part, this is, you know, where we see a transition. I think we have seen this throughout history. I mean, Hannah said before that we are in a process that is, you know, unprecedented. I think we had quite huge changes in the three former phases of industrialization, particularly like 120 years ago, around the start of the 20th century, where many people, you know, started to enter like manufacturing types of jobs, needed to learn new skills, even though the gap was probably less to bridge for these people from agricultural towards, you know, still kind of manual task and manufacturing. But so the point is that we have plenty of great new jobs that didn't exist some time ago, but they require very specific types of skills. And as we have seen from Hannah's presentation, and also, you know, the analysis of the gig economy that Anna I talked about, the types of jobs that we see online are not necessarily those that require particularly types of formal education, but specific technical jobs. So also maybe to qualify what Hannah said earlier, these specific types of technical skills are becoming important, but they are embedded in a dense network in relationships to other types of skills. And this is, I think, where a lot of work needs to be done by governments, organizations, labor ministries, employers, and employees to identify what the type of skill it is that you will want to learn as an individual to go away from this job that might be at risk of automatization towards one that you know, gives you a sustainable livelihood into the future.
Amazing. Yeah, that's really true as well. The second question is for you, Fabian, actually. When someone's asking, why not teach ML? I'm not sure what that stands for. Perhaps you have a better insight of it.
Machine learning, yeah.
Okay.
No, that's a great idea. And I think, you know, there is organizations talking about, you know, gig economy platforms that have great ideals and great values behind, like, you know, lifting people out of poverty, like, for example, the Rockefeller Foundation and a program by the Kenyan government called Ajira Digital Program. They both have the aim of bringing 1 million online jobs to people in Southern Africa, like online jobs, as we saw from these gig economy platforms. And this is a great thing. The problem, though, is, again, we're talking about, you know, this network of skills, this network of technologies and related dependencies at the labor market. You can learn machine learning, but this doesn't come out of the blue. It requires a bit of mathematics, a bit of coding, and all these kind of things. So you need to be close with, you know, whatever you bring in as a person to move toward these novel skills, even though, you know, many of them are oftentimes not that complicated, you know, these tiny additional little bits of data science and analytics that you could do, but you need to have some proximity to those that you can actually harness them. And that is, I want to refer to a project of my fellow researcher, Fabian Stefani at the Oxford Internet Institute and Alexander von Humboldt Institute. This is where I think a very interesting new research aspect could be looked at. What is the value of any particular skill from where you are, the type of job you're doing. Therefore, the statement, why not teach ML? Teaching ML is great, but teaching ML is not great. Machine learning is not great for everyone. Getting more machine learning for a person like me who works as a data scientist is probably a great thing. Same for Ellen, where they would be, has the same value for Hannah, might be a completely different story. If her research and her work is on a completely different field, it might not add much if she would bring in machine learning. For her, it might be that other types of whatever qualitative research methodologies might be more useful. So it really depends on where you are and what is realistic for you as an employee to learn, but also, you know, for the overall local labor market, how it could be specified. And therefore you need to think of it holistically and always look at demand as well as supply at the same time.
Okay, yeah, just to add something small about what Fabian is actually adding. What I think, what we found also from even from our research is that even from the gig economy, I think the issue of diversity is very important. When most paying job does not necessarily mean more people are earning more. It could also mean that is the most easily available job. Yes. So that is it means that more people are there. That's there. So one thing also we found that there are also rare skills which you also need also to learn. One skill that we found actually today was an accounting, for instance, like accounting jobs, which there are actually few people, but actually highly paying jobs. So if someone is probably good in accounting, and probably even someone is also good in translation and interpretation, those are some of the skills which we actually, when we dig down into our data, we found they are few, but they're actually highly paying jobs. So that is also something also that not everyone can get ML, because ML might not be the most paying job. Where there are even other paying jobs which we found from our data, for instance, accounting and finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I think it's really good answers and good questions coming in as well. So the next question, I think, especially for Hannah with education, it's asking about universities. So what's the use of going to a university when you can just go directly into the IT industry and get a well-paid job?
I mean, I think there's a huge argument for that. And I think a lot of there's a growing body of literature that really is supporting the idea of thinking about higher education in a different way. Thinking about, you know, education now is more of a lifelong process means that we don't necessarily have to think about education being compartmentalized in the way it has been in the past. So yes, obviously you do want people to have a general base of knowledge. And I think that, you know, primary education and secondary education is essential, but what we're doing and how we're teaching that needs to be rethought. And also then at the university or the higher education or further education level or whatever you want to call it. But in terms of specialization, we do need to think again about kind of, is it the best use of our time to think about kind of your kind of foundational skills and all of the things that you really have to get through in order to finish your degree? What do the qualifications actually do for you? Probably not as much as sometimes the training and on-the-job experience might give you. So there's been a lot of movement toward revitalizing or even creating apprenticeships in certain countries where they don't have them and doing them differently. And I think that there's a huge benefit in really rethinking the way we do education and the way we think about how people learn and think of it as an ongoing process that you can continue to learn within the workplace as well and in between different jobs, and how most people are actually thinking of a portfolio of careers throughout their lifetime rather than one thing that they're going to do. Because even when you do specialize in university and your job isn't necessarily automated, it will change, and you will have to adapt to the new technologies that might make it work differently, or make it easier, or make the certain skill or skill set that you have, basically less applicable. You might actually then, be the accountant that is looking at more complex issues because you have a tax accounting program that's doing so much of that for you and is replacing some of the core skills that you thought you needed. So I think that there's just that adaptation, and I think it is important to think about the higher education space differently, for sure.
Yeah. All right, next question. This is from Mako, and Mako is asking about what's this with skill polarization? Is it only technological, or is it social political? So how do we look at this issue from different perspectives? Is it a blend? What is it? So perhaps Alan?
I think there are so many aspects that come across about it. One thing that we also found also from our result is the inequality that comes around even the skill. Sometimes the skill is there, but the pay is not equal. So those are some of the things we found. So, for instance, we could from our research we found today that a similar job in Africa, someone might pay maybe $0.9. That's what we found. The same job in Europe, someone will pay $20. The same job, someone in the US will pay $80 for that same job. So there are a number of factors. And also, those are some of the things that we are trying also to see what might be the difference in terms of this skill polarization. So it could be a mix, but also one thing that it means also there's a lot of competition. More people are coming online. So it means also these jobs are also, like for instance in Kenya, what we found out is that for every 9 applicants, there's one hire. So it means there's also very intense competition in some of these areas. So I would put it as both political and also skill itself. Yeah. And also in infrastructure, some people also are not also in Africa. More people are only in the cities. So they are the only people who are benefiting. That's what we found also in our data. The more the people who are in the city are the people who are actually getting these jobs. Those people are in rural areas are not, most of them are not online. So these are some of the factors that also need to look at. How can we bring more people online in the rural areas from the data that we found?
Yeah, that's really insightful to bring people online to sort of balance that urban rural aspect of things. Right, Fabian, I will direct the next question to you. What are the short and long-term effects of job polarization on skill distribution between young people in developing countries, especially? And perhaps Hannah, you can chip in there as well.
Yeah, I think, obviously, talking about the short-term effect, we looked into some of them. This is obviously, short-term problems is like, people might not get the job they want, they might not get the wage they want, they might need to work longer hours. Like, for example, we see on these online gig economy platforms that people also spend a lot of time applying for jobs that they might not get. And the main driver here, I would like to say, particularly with regards to gig economies, but overall, I think is, a trend towards globalization. So we see increasingly interconnected global value chains. So we see that, particularly online, more demand in the US will lead to better wages in India and Africa and other places. So we see this global effect really playing out. So polarization means that obviously, we see a mismatch. We see that, supply and demand is not matched. And in the long term, this is speculative, of course, what I'm telling here, but the long term could be quite negative effects. This is unemployment for people. This might be more migration induced because of lack of opportunities in local areas, which brings in obviously more political problems, social problems, and many more. So I think it is a very important task throughout the 21st century, or at least the decade that we are living in right now, that are there to come, to make this transition smooth, as it worked or didn't work in earlier transitions that we talked about, like Industrial Revolution, where we also had huge problems that actually led to some of the worst crises of human history. So I hope in order to avoid some of them, it would be really good to stick heads together and try to find ways to mitigate some of these skill polarizations, some of these bad outcomes for a majority or for a large share of people, in order to let people participate in the global wealth, but also avoid negative outcomes.
Yeah.
Can I jump in just really quick? I think that's right on point. I think one of the other short-term problems is something that we see quite a bit in, for instance, the region that I look at, which is the cultural perception. So a lot of the pressure that comes from your family is what dictates kind of what you do with your life. So you think about, you know, those kind of transitions into different types of education. There's pressure to become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, and something familiar. And so moving into a space that is a little bit uncertain and not necessarily regulated and not having that 9-to-5 job, or, you know, that is very scary for a lot of people and families, and that's not necessarily a shared aspiration. And I think that that is definitely one of the areas where there's a lot of struggles in terms of kind of how these transitions might not necessarily be as smooth as possible. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that as well. And I think that, you know, obviously one of the benefits is once you do start and you start making money, it takes some of that stigma away, but it's difficult for young people in that transition. And so, you know, having that infrastructure, again, in the long term, where it's not just the government, but it's really an interplay of everybody that has access to resources. So it's the private sector, it's the multinationals, it's the third sector as well, really working to create an infrastructure where this is viable is essential for it to actually not end up with huge disasters that we'll have to work out of for so long.
All right. Not sure if you can hear me, but all right, I think we have been overstepping the time for this event, but it was so insightful to have you all today to discuss about skill polarization and the future of work, and to get some of your insights on some key topics. And just to close off here in this event, thank you for joining. Please follow us on. Quick note on this: you will have an opportunity to discuss and make your policies in the end of July, if I'm not wrong, about the different policies around responsible technology. So keep updated with that. And yeah, I would just like to thank our panelists today for coming and joining us from all over the world, really. And thank you so much for today.